York Subliners joined the news today as they officially announced the signing of the French phenom Hydra. And I will say first impressions by this move are very exciting ones, I would say, right? This has been a rumor for a while now. If you've been following a lot of the details around different teams, decisions that they could be making behind the scenes, Intel, Call of Duty, a lot of different channels have kind of been outputting this idea that New York is very interested in someone like Hydra. And it is very exciting to see that this has officially come into play. And we've also kind of known that since, I should say, maybe it's been like a few months since this has kind of officially taken place, but Clayster has already spoken previously on the interest that he has in Hydra. It was said not all that long ago, again, like I said, a few months ago, where he talked on how impressed he was by Hydra. It's how it's kind of one of the challenger players that he does have his eye on. And then obviously with New York ended up signing Clayster, it kind of does fit this puzzle, if you will, of Clayster being with New York. Clayster has already shown interest in this guy named Hydra, and now Hydra is with New York as well. And I'd probably say that is a decent reason as for why he's here. Not that, Clayster being in New York is the defining moment, but I think it does have something to do with it. And obviously Hydra does join alongside the other New York Subliner players, that currently being Clayster, Mac, and Zuma. Now, in terms of those who are wondering, who is this guy Hydra? Is he a starter? Where exactly does this kind of fall right now? It is not confirmed whether or not he is a starter. I know there have been a lot of people who have already tried to come out there and say, oh, he definitely is, or he definitely is not. The reason why there are questions is because there has not been anything made known by New York specifically. And I'd imagine if he was coming onto this team as a starter, that would have been made known by now. I believe that Clayster kind of tweeted out that 4/5 of the team is complete, meaning that most likely that 5, obviously 4 of them will have to start. I'm imagining that New York is approaching this as, 4 starters, 1 substitute, the final 2 subs, or kind of that 4th and 5th player are most likely going to be in contention for that starting position. And the other person that is kind of rumored to be going here, if you haven't already seen it, is John. Has a leave of absence for a number of different rumors that we can kind of get into at another time. For his possible comeback, does not play in the first year of franchising after what was rumored to be a possible ban. Again, a lot of speculation around that, but it is rumored that he could possibly be going to New York as well. And again, I believe that it's going to be between both of those players for who will most likely start. If John doesn't even come here, I imagine whoever that player that they are thinking about bringing on will most likely be in contention with Hydra for this 4th and final starting position. Now, I will say, first off, for this move in particular, it is huge for the French scene because there has been a lot of noise around not just the EU challengers, but the challengers division as a whole. With the amount of young talent that is out there right now, we saw a ton of different challenger talent come through from obviously the challenger side and enter in toward the CDL and have a lot of success. We saw teams like the Guerrillas pull it off. We saw the Mutineers pull it off. We saw obviously the New York Subliners do that with Mac, and they arguably had some of the biggest impacts when it comes down to a team in terms of the way that they kind of turned around their season. So they've already experienced it before New York, and they're looking on possibly doing it again. And I believe that this is massive for the EU challenger scene. I think this is big for the French region, especially considering that the kind of French talent that we've had in the CDL, or rather in the CWL, the CDL, has obviously kind of taken a hit. There was a lot of hype around possibly the Paris Legion bringing on someone like Brezzi to start. That never ends up happening. So I think that this has the ability to possibly cause a domino effect. Now, there is no confirmation on other, when we talk about French talent specifically, but there has been a lot of rumors with other EU challenger talent, Singularity, especially players, maybe getting the call as well. So I think this is great. Now, in terms of Hydra specifically, only 18 years old, I believe turned 18 in February of this year. I'm not 100% sure on his level of speaking English that has the ability to hold him back. I know with medals in the Toronto Ultra, that was one kind of big thing for them. Obviously a very international team. I think it's the first team maybe in Call of Duty history. I know for sure in CDL history, the only team to have 5 players who are all from 5 different countries in the starting lineup at the same time. And that came with a little bit of issue issues from time to time, and some of that came with the communication problems, Metals being a prime example of that. So I'm not 100% sure where he sits right now. I know when his prior coach, Driel, had spoke a little bit about it on Twitter, talking on how he's worked with Hydra specifically on his English, said that he went from not speaking anything to being a chatterbox. So again, not 100% where that stands for right now. But in terms of kind of that transition, I think that it could be a solid one. I've heard a lot of talk about Brezzy. When Brezzy joined the E6 team, he kind of picked it up very, very well as time kind of went on with the roster. And obviously their placement at the Black Ops 4 champs did not indicate that they had problems with communication whatsoever. Now this Hydra guy, right? He has been a prodigy for the French scene for a very long time. He really kind of came on the radar back in 2017, Infinite Warfare, started to play at a lot of locals, and really has kind of dominated the French scene since then. He's kind of been on the radar since he was 14 years old, maybe even before that as well, but at least from a public standpoint, playing in kind of competitive tournaments, been kind of doing that since he was 14 years old. And he was by far one of my favorite EU Challenger players to watch throughout this season. I would say himself mixed in with maybe Dave and Afro from Team War. Those two guys obviously kind of dominated the EU Challenger placements in terms of first place prizing, things of that nature. But without a doubt, one of my favorite players to watch alongside those two was this guy in Hydra. A number of different highlights, a number of different phenomenal moments for him throughout his time on Train Hard all season long. Played with some very good EU vets, played with a lot of French veterans as well, guys like Whalers and Brezzy. You know, really, he played with a number of different guys throughout this season, which I think is great. And one guy who I know has had a lot of interest in him was, in fact, the Paris analyst Novus Vita, shout out to him, where he essentially released some stats from all this, and this accounts for all Challenger players. So that means, you know, North America, Europe, and APAC. And these are essentially where he stands in regards to those regions kind of facing off against one another. So he had a 1.33 KD in domination, which was second in all of Challengers, a 1.23 KD in hardpoint, which was fifth. And for a player that's playing as fast as he is, that's very, very impressive. 1.20 KD in search and destroy, which is good enough for ninth. And kind of based off of those, first off, the consistency across those modes is excellent. That's great to see. It's not kind of a quick fall off. We know for SMGs, sometimes certain modes kind of relied more heavily on others. You look at hardpoint versus domination. Oftentimes there could be a decent disparity between the two. For him, it seemed to be all around very consistent. He averaged 2.99 in kills per minute in hardpoint, which is good enough for second, and that is very, very, very high. Probably one of the faster players, if we were to saw him in the CDL, would definitely be at one of the top slots in that list. To kind of give a comparison, that's faster than a BZ. He had 2.60 kills per round in domination, which is good enough for second. Average 0.83 kills per round in search and destroy, which is good enough for seventh. And again, those numbers, I obviously speak on them in a very high level. You have to consider that is versus challengers, right? That is versus EU Challenger players primarily. And not to say that those players can't compete, but you talk about how those kind of average out in terms of versus the regular CDL players, it is going to be different. And those numbers will be vastly changed up a tad. But you also have to consider players that he is playing against at a top level. Also, we've heard this a numerous amount of times, top North American teams, top European teams, especially in Challengers. A lot of people were kind of high on them saying, hey, some of these teams were good enough to be in the CDL. So keep that in mind. Now, this move in particular, as we kind of round this thing out, this move comes to a surprise for a lot of people. And I will say that confusion only showcases how talented this guy is, because it is kind of odd to think that the New York Subliners, they add in Clayster, regarded as one of the better players, or rather one of the best players in Call of Duty history, off of a world championship, and one of his first moves that he kind of makes on this brand is they go and pick up this French 18-year-old that a lot of people haven't heard about. And I will say that it's interesting because that just goes to show that with all the headlines that New York is going to have moving into next year, this is one of the first moves that they make, right? This is the first move that this franchise makes after one of, if not the biggest offseason acquisition of any team in the CDL, which is incredibly interesting given New York's future track record and how much the spotlight is going to be on this team. Now having Clayster, obviously with the personalities they already have on this group, the decisions that they make. So I think this is huge for New York. And I will say, kind of in retrospect as well, doesn't look good on Paris Legion, right? I mean, the French talent kind of slips through their fingers. This was a guy who was, again, expected to possibly be joining this team. It was rumored by a number of different sources that not only was Hydra potentially supposed to go to the Paris Legion, but when Mac, after kind of his moment on Hybrid Black, Paris Legion were also in some ways interested with a player of his caliber. And so that they lose both Mac and Hydra to a team who is going to be leading without question in terms of one of the better CDL franchises coming into year 2. So it hurts the Paris Legion, I think, from a media standpoint, particularly if you're looking at a guy who has obviously been in the French scene and has kind of been dominating in the French scene, a Prodigy. It would be perfect if he could have joined alongside the Paris Legion to just kind of make what is a perfect sense of things. But he ends up obviously going to New York instead. And again, that could have a lot to do with Clayster, who I feel like has the ability to really define what is going to be this young French star in Hydra. And we know the impact that Clayster has on young players. It can't be understated. And I will say that some people actually don't even realize, despite what has been the last 2 world championships that Clayster has accrued, it's actually more young talent than you probably think, because not only did he have an impact in 2019, right? Wins with the Tiny Terrors and Simp and Abizi. They win the world championship. Not only did he win a world championship with Shotzi and Illy back this year with the Dallas Empire, but Clayster also won a world championship with an 18-year-old Attach, right? People forget about that, right? Back in 2015, Advanced Warfare, Attach, the youngest world champion ever, was 18 years old, right? He was kind of helping that player along. He's obviously won championships with a young Zuma and Attach back at Advanced Warfare. He played with the Twins in only their second official kind of top-level year of competing, kind of then as well. So you have to consider it is not just a short list that Clayster has. It's not just been the past 2 years where he has been working and developing on young talent. He's been doing this for a very long majority of his career. In fact, the last 5 seasons, in some way, a young player has been involved, and particularly in the last 2 seasons, he has won world championships with them. So I think not only his impact on Mac is very interesting, but also his potential impact on somebody like Hydra, I think could be the very best thing for someone like him in general. And, there have been talks on the Dallas Empire. I've had the chance to sit down with Ray and a few other guys as well from the team, kind of talk on what was the Dallas Empire's key to success. And a lot of time it was on that communication, the ability for the young guys to be able to receive direction. From what I've heard from guys like Attach and Zuma, when they've talked about Mac particularly, it has been that he is a great player, a lot of veteran qualities. And I think if Hydra can match that, if he can kind of listen to someone like Clay, be willing to kind of take that criticism along with learning English along the way, I think New York could be in a wonderful spot. But again, Hydra, a huge move for the New York Subliners, one that I'm very interested to see exactly how it pans out. A lot of pressure on this team, and that pressure also will affect what is going to be the new French guy on the block, right? This player who has not really been known to a lot of the Call of Duty audience now is going to be put in the spotlight alongside a 2-time world champion, or rather, excuse me, a 3-time world champion, back-to-back world champion in Clayster here on the Subliners. A big move, and again, I look forward to seeing exactly how Hydra pans out and how he starts to perform in Cold War.